The morning sun had barely risen when the old screen door of the farmhouse creaked open, and the man who owned it, Joran Haldon, a weary single father, froze in place, his breath caught, his heartbeat stumbled, because standing in the middle of his dusty living room, as if they belonged there, were two women he had never seen before. One was wrapped in a threadbare blanket, staring at him with wide, startled eyes. The other stood protectively in front of the first, her posture tense but trembling, as if bracing herself for the worst. Joran felt his grip tighten on the box of tools in his hands. The farmhouse he had poured every scrap of hope into, the place he believed would be his and his son's new beginning, was no longer abandoned. Someone was already living his new life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected encounters, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support keeps these heartfelt stories shining. Joran had bought the farmhouse only a month earlier, after years of working double shifts at the local warehouse and doing anything he could to raise his son, Callan, on his own. Callan was 12 now, thoughtful and quiet, more sensitive than most boys his age. After losing his mother when he was just a toddler, he clung to every bit of stability Joran could offer, and lately that stability had been fraying. Their cramped apartment, the late bills, the tension that came with stretching dollars, Joran saw the toll it took on his son. That's why he bought the farmhouse, a cheap, nearly collapsing structure on 5 acres of overgrown land, far from the noise and pressures of town. He couldn't afford much, but he could afford hope, and that was enough. He had planned to renovate it week by week, bringing Callan along whenever he could, watching the old place slowly transform into a home. But the night before his last scheduled visit, a storm barreled through, leaving roads blocked and causing a small accident that put Joran's car in the shop for weeks. By the time he returned to the farmhouse, walking up the dirt path with sore feet and determination, he expected the same silence, the same emptiness. Instead, he found 2 strangers in the middle of his living room. The women didn't speak at first. Their faces were pale with fear, not defiance. The older one, maybe late 20s, had deep shadows under her eyes and kept glancing toward the younger one beside her, who looked barely 19. Joran set down his tools slowly, raising his hands a little to show he wasn't a threat. The house felt unnaturally warm compared to its usual cold emptiness, and a faint smell of soup lingered in the air. These weren't vandals or thieves. They were survivors of something, he could tell instantly. The older one stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke, explaining that her name was Mara, and the girl behind her was her younger sister, Loon. They had nowhere else to go. They had stumbled upon the farmhouse on the night of the storm, soaked and desperate, planning to stay only for a night. But once the roads closed and Mara lost her job, everything spiraled. Loon had been quietly ill for months, kept home by Mara's efforts, and when the hospital bills grew too steep, the sisters began drifting from couch to couch, until there were no couches left. The farmhouse was the first roof they'd found that didn't reject them. Joran listened in heavy silence. He could have been angry, maybe he should have been, but instead he felt something twist inside him, something familiar. He saw the way Mara's hands trembled as she spoke. He saw the way Loon leaned into her, fragile and exhausted. He saw fear, the same kind he felt every time he worried about failing his own son. Without meaning to, without planning for it, without even fully understanding why, he sighed and told them he wasn't going to call the police or force them out immediately. He just needed time to think. The following days were thick with uncertainty. Joran brought Callan to the farmhouse the next morning, expecting resistance or fear, but Callan surprised him. The boy noticed Loon shivering on the porch and quietly handed her his jacket, mumbling an awkward greeting before slipping past Mara into the house. It was one tiny moment, but Joran felt something soften inside him again. Joran worked on the house while the sisters kept to themselves, always offering to help, always apologizing for their presence. Mara cooked meals from simple ingredients, insisting she owed them something. Loon folded laundry, swept floors, and often sat with Callan, both of them reading in mutual silence like two people who understood loneliness too well. The house felt alive in a way Joran hadn't expected. Still, he knew this couldn't last forever. He couldn't legally let them stay. He couldn't financially support anyone other than his son. And yet, the thought of sending them away made his chest ache like he was betraying a piece of himself. One evening, after a long day of repairing the porch, Joran found Loon sitting alone under the big elm tree behind the house, her breathing shallow. He gently approached and realized she was trying to hide a coughing fit. Alarmed, he brought Mara over, and together they managed to calm Loon until she could breathe again. That night, Mara confessed everything: Loon's condition, the medications they had run out of, the clinics that refused them without insurance, the fear of watching her sister slowly fade. Joran stayed quiet for a long time before finally telling her they weren't alone anymore. Not while he lived here, not while he still had strength to help. Over the next few weeks, they became something like a blended, fragile family. Mara helped Joran rebuild the foundation and repair wiring. Loon and Callan tended the garden and cleared debris. Joran found a low-cost clinic through a co-worker and quietly drove Loon there for checkups. Slowly, her strength began returning. Mara smiled more often, though she always looked at Joran with a mixture of gratitude and guilt, like she couldn't understand why a stranger would choose to help them. But trouble arrived when the old property owner, who had sold the place cheaply due to financial troubles, showed up unexpectedly. He saw Mara and Loon outside and immediately accused Joran of harboring trespassers. The confrontation was loud and bitter, echoing across the fields. The owner threatened to involve authorities, claiming the contract gave him the right to revoke the sale if the property was being misused. Joran's heart pounded as he tried to explain that he wasn't running a shelter. He was just helping two people who needed warmth, safety, and a chance. But the man wouldn't listen. That night, after the owner left, Mara tearfully told Joran they would leave at dawn. She couldn't risk losing the house for him and Callan. Joran felt an unexpected surge of panic. The thought of Mara's determined eyes gone from the kitchen, of Loon's gentle presence missing from the porch, of Callan's newfound companionship disappearing, it broke something inside him. But he didn't stop her then. He let her speak, let her believe it was the only option. What he didn't tell her was that he still had one option left. The next morning, while the sisters quietly packed their few belongings, Joran went into town and confronted the former owner at the county records office. Calmly, firmly, and with every bit of strength he'd ever used to protect his son, he insisted the legal sale was binding. He threatened to file a complaint for harassment. He pointed out every clause, every detail in the paperwork that guaranteed the property was his and only his. And for the first time in years he felt powerful, not through aggression, but through purpose. When he returned home, he found Mara and Loon sitting on the porch steps, bags beside them, eyes swollen. Joran took a deep breath and told them the truth. The owner had backed down, they weren't going anywhere, and the farmhouse, this place all of them had bled and cried and worked for, was big enough for all four of them. Mara broke down sobbing, covering her face, while Loon hugged Callan tightly. And for the first time in a long time, Joran felt like life wasn't just surviving anymore, it was healing. Weeks passed, and the farmhouse transformed into something luminous. The sun seemed brighter there, the air softer. Loon gained weight and laughter. Mara found a part-time job in town, and every evening she brought home stories that filled the kitchen with warmth. Callan, who once seemed afraid of the world, now walked taller, braver. And Joran, he found that the emptiness he had carried for years had quietly faded, replaced by something he never expected to find again: joy, connection, and maybe, someday, love. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more souls who need them. Special request. Comment hope lives here. If the story warmed your heart.